Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, so let's go ahead and get after it on this beautiful Labor Day weekend. Already played golf once, going to do it again for sure. But make sure you're getting this done right before you come back to school. So test grades are all in. Everything is updated. We started our new unit on Rome. Now remember really quickly, also this one Prezi is already uploaded to Google Classroom, and it is what the entire Rome unit will be based off of, all right? And as you can see right here, boom, we're already moving through it pretty nicely. This unit, actually a little bit shorter than the last one, right? So you need to be prepared for a test coming up in the next about 2-ish weeks, all right? But let's pick up where we left off in class, right? Where we left off in class, we were talking about the geography of Italy, right? We talked about the Tiber River running through Rome, the Alps and the Apennine mountain ranges keeping Rome protected. We talked about the coastal areas of Italy being mostly cliff and very little natural harbor whatsoever, how that was beneficial for military structure but not beneficial for trade. We discussed also volcanic ash and silt being in the Tiber River and that actually making it much more accessible to farming techniques and farmable land being much more plentiful in Italy than it was in Greece, right? So basically, we are now dealing with a culture that has a lot of similarities to the ancient Greeks in terms of religious structure, attire, diet, like things like that. But we're looking at a place that was geographically the exact opposite, right? Now, we know the founding ideas of Greece, right? We know that the first two civilizations to pop up on ancient Greece were the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, and then the Dark Ages is going to occur with the late Bronze Age collapse and the immigration in of the Dorians, right? Now, we then go off to see Sparta and Athens rise up and a lot of other prominent city-states because Greece is a huge area, whereas Rome is one city that would eventually take over a giant area in Italy and beyond, past the Alps, northern Africa, most of modern-day Europe, and it would leave their lasting cultural impacts there. But they all started as one city. The empire that would be known as Rome began as just one city, right? Now, this city has a myth behind its founding. We talked about it already in G period. We barely got to it in C period, in B period, and we didn't get to it at all in C period. So to just go over it again, right, for those of you who already have heard this or know this, you can go ahead and fast forward a little bit. But for C period especially, you have it, right? So getting into it, though, the founding myth goes like this, right? So apparently there was a city in Italy, right, known as Alba Longa, right? It was in the Alban Hills, and it was home to a pretty decent-sized little community. Now, do you need to write this whole thing down? No. You only need to write down a couple of the key factors that are going to pop up here in a second, okay? Now, but in Alba Longa, there was this struggle for power, right? There was this guy named Numitor who had a brother named Abelius, I believe his name was. But anyway, it doesn't really matter because all you really need to know is that Numitor loses his throne to his brother, right? And his brother hears a prophecy that two twins will rise up and destroy him and take the throne back and rightfully give it back to Numitor, their grandfather, right? So when he hears this, he takes his niece, right, and her name is Rhea, and puts her in a convent of sorts, right, and turns her into what is called a Vestal Virgin. And she has to literally, cannot get married, cannot have children, and is told that she must live a celibate life for the rest of her life, right? Now, what happens, though, is Rhea gets pregnant, right? And according to the myth, Rhea gets pregnant from the god of war in Rome named Mars. You know him in the Greek culture as Ares, right? So she gets pregnant with two twin boys, gives birth to them, and names them Romulus, Romulus, and Remus, Remus, right? And they can be seen right here. But some of you are immediately asking the questions like, that doesn't look like their mom. That looks like a wolf, right? Well, to continue the story going forward, the man, I cannot remember their uncle's name. It's like Abelius or their uncle that is now in control of Alba Longa, decides to tell some of his soldiers, go find those two twins that my niece has given birth to and have them killed. Throw them in the Tiber River and watch them drown, right? Now, apparently these soldiers, though, could not bring themselves to do this, and were like, I can't just sit here and kill these babies, right? And so what they do instead is they stick them in a basket, and they stick that basket on the banks of the Tiber where it is bound to flood, right? And so the waters did rise, and flood it did, and it took the twins down the river just a little ways before they were saved by this creature, right? A she-wolf named Lupa, L-U-P-A, right? And Lupa would suckle and nurse them so that they would not die, right? kept them alive long enough for a shepherd to show up later, who would show up and take the boys into his home and foster them, and then they would grow a little bit older, and then they would see their grandfather Numitar later on in the town, etc., etc., etc. But long story short, these two twin boys rose up in power, destroyed their uncle's rule over over Alba Longa, and gave the throne back to their grandfather, Numitar, right? So very successful in military out the gate. But what they decide to do is they decide to strike out, and they want to start a city-state of their own, right? And the city-state that they decide to settle is on 7 different hills, right? 7. They see 7 hills along the banks of the Tiber, which will provide both a military protective and also just a more accessible to farmland area for their settlement, right? So they decide to settle it on how many hills again? 7 different hills. Then they get into an argument, and they can't decide which hill to settle on, right? So you have to understand that Romulus wants to settle their new city-state on Palatine Hill, right? Palatine Hill being the origin of our modern-day word for palace, all right? So he decides he wants to settle there, but then Remus says, no, let's settle on Aventine Hill, this one over here. Romulus starts building the settlement on his own without even consulting his brother. They get into a huge argument after an augury competition, which they basically say, oh, we'll look at birds, and however many birds are over the hill, that'll be the gods telling us which hill to settle on. And so they look at all the birds, and Remus says, oh, look, I got 6 birds. We got to settle on my hill. But then Romulus goes, but I got 12 birds. Eat that, nerd. And then they decide to settle on Palatine Hill, but they get into an argument over how they're going to rule, and Romulus ends up stabbing Remus to death and kills him, and he names the city of Rome after himself, Romulus, Rome, right? Boom. That is the condensed version of the founding myth, right? That is the founding of Rome as told by the Romans themselves. And of course, this myth would go on. There's several different iterations of it. I'm giving you the Livy version of it, right? L-I-V-Y. You don't need to write that down, but I'm giving you this particular Roman historian's version of this particular story. And then there are several others. A guy named Ovid talks about it as well, saying that actually Remus lived until ripe old age, blah, 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 blah. But the big thing about it is this story is important because we will reference back to it later multiple times when we bring up certain themes of Rome, like civil war, or when we bring up the killing of the emperors, and we bring up different ideas like that. All right, so good to know that that is the founding myth, that apparently these two twin boys who were saved by a wolf struck out to settle on 7 hills. They couldn't agree where. Romulus stabs Remus, right? So nuts and bolts of the story. But we know for a fact that that's not actually what happened, right? We know for a fact as a historical community that there's no way that mythical babies were born to a virgin and then one killed the other one and then that's how Rome started, right? This is just the story or the myth or even the legend that Romans will refer to it as later on of their mythical founding, their connection to the gods, and the idea that they were divinely sent by their god of war, Mars, to strike out and found this city. Some people actually argue also that maybe their enemies came up with this myth, that maybe the Sabines or possibly several other tribes of Italy came up with this myth to try and show how awful the Romans were later on when they were trying to take over everything. I like to use it as just this is an ancient people trying to wrap their noggins around the idea of a very, very large empire and its beginnings. Now, that does have a real beginning, though, okay? So just so you know, there is a historical founding to Rome. There was no there might have been a Romulus, but we don't think he was born by divine oration to a virgin. We believe that the real founding of Rome settles around a group of people that showed up in Italy in the thousands BC, known as the Latins, right? And these Latins were the very, very first settlers of the area of which we would refer to as the modern day middle, not modern day middle area, but the middle area of Rome, or of Italy, where Rome is located, right? The Latins apparently showed up in houses like these, which look absolutely terrible. It doesn't have a roof. No, I'm just kidding. It's a total split section. It's just trying to show you a primitive Latin house. But you're going to see some Neolithic settlements from these people known as the Latins. And then apparently a small group of the Latins broke off and went away and settled what is now called Rome. So the Latins showed up first, a small group of them of Latin origin, right? And why are these people called the Latins? Because that is the language of which they spoke, right? They spoke of what we would refer to as modern-day Latin. So the Romans are going to be founded by these original settlers that, again, speak what we would refer to as colloquial or common-based Latin. Of course, probably, I'm sure, a primitive form of it. But another really, really important part is going to be where their original settlement is located, right? So, of course, as we talked about with the Romulus and Remus myth, Rome is going to be founded on a hill overlooking the Tiber River, right? The Tiber River being the river that they were almost thrown into. The hills referring to, of course, the 7 major hills that Rome is going to be founded on top of. And the reason why it was put there, according to a lot of Roman writers like Livy and Cicero that are going to come up later, a lot of them refer to it as Romulus in his military-like style, being able to foresee the possibility of ever being attacked and being able to be on higher ground to withstand any type of bombardment and or to be able to withstand any type of attack. Now, the bigger reason why they're going to settle on these hills, though, especially the early Romans, the real Romans, the historical Romans that actually shot off the Latin group, is going to be mainly because it's going to protect from floods, right? The Tiber River floods every single oh, God, what season would it flood? Oh, yeah, towards the spring season after, ice melt from the Alps and the Apennines, right? So the Tiber River, it, seasonally floods. When it floods and breaks its banks, the silt, the flooding that, of course, almost dragged the babies away, the silt and the volcanic ash from the bottom of the river are going to be churned up, and they're going to be left behind on the soil, creating good planting and farming conditions, right? Now, though, going forward, this right here is what we believe the map of these settlements would look like. Why is it so crusty? Why is it so, what the heck? All right, well, look. We'll look up real quick a hills map of Rome. There we go. And there we go. Now, there it is, all right? There's the better version of it. Now, I don't know why Prezi sometimes doesn't want to give me a non-pixelated, picture, but here we go. So, as we can see, there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hills referred to in the legend of Romulus and Remus. Now, also, just so you understand, as you can see, there are more hills. It's not just those 7, but these 7 happen to be located on the eastern banks of the Tiber River. And, of course, these 2, Aventine and Palatine, are the 2 that the brothers fought over, as in, which one are we going to settle, right? Romulus wanted to settle Palatine. Remus wanted to settle on Aventine. Stab, stab, stab. They end up, actually moving their settlement to Palatine because Remus ends up catching a cold case of what is known as death, or by fratricide, which is actually killing your brother, all right? So, but they end up settling on Palatine, and then the entire settlement again begins to cover the 7 major hills of Rome, right? You do not need to write down all of the hills, okay? We will end up talking about 3 very particular key important ones, being Palatine, Capitoline, and Aventine. Palatine actually being the origin of the modern-day word for palace, which is really, really cool. So then going forward, there we are right there, and you can actually see some other major things through the growth of Rome, because the very, very important thing which we're about to talk about now, of course, is the nearby Etruscans that are going to show up, and they're going to settle the entire area north of Rome and end up taking over a large area, including Rome itself, right? So they're actually going to be controlled by these people known as the Etruscans for quite some time. But the really good focal point to focus on is, of course, what everything's settled around. Definitely has to be the area right here in the middle, which we will talk about a little bit later, okay? Now, it's this area known as the Forum, right? F-O-R-U-M, which is like the Roman equivalent of the Agora, right? Now, but as they're settling themselves, and as these people known as the Romans begin to grow their civilization, there is a city-state and a community to their north known as the Etruscans, right? E-T-R-U-S-C-A-N-S, which had already been nearby and had already had time to grow their settlement and had grown into a pretty solidly based civilization up to this point. So these Etruscans that lived in the north are going to cause major problems for these people now calling themselves the Romans, right? And just to give you some understanding, this right here is the Tiber River, and this is the Tiber River in November. This is outside of flood season. This is actually post-flood season, even though you can see the muddy waters and stuff like that, because it actually is going to be churned with all that silt and volcanic ash inside of it. And then, of course, this is my wife doing a headstand on, that's Aventine Hill, actually. Aventine Hill, where Remus wanted to settle everything. This is her doing a headstand there. And then, of course, this is the map of the Roman settlement as well. Now, the Etruscans are a major group of people to understand and know, though, okay? Because the Etruscans are going to be the people that give Rome a lot of their cultural ideas. They build the very first walls that actually surround the Roman settlement. But they're also going to be the first strife that Romans are going to have to deal with. And what I mean by that is the Etruscans are going to take over the Romans, right? They created a few city-states north of the area that you would refer to to as modern-day Rome. Now, the thing about it is they traded with the Greeks, and they shared that culture with the Greeks. If we're looking at this picture of Etruscans right here, this fresco, we can see a couple of key things that are very, very important. Some of them being the instruments. We saw that lap lyre in a picture of Athenian education. This flute right here is of Greek origin as well. The laurel wreaths, the tunics, a lot of the different and the olive trees right here are going to be major Greek things that the Etruscans are going to adopt from those Greeks. And also, they're going to adopt the phonetic alphabet from the Greeks, which is going to be the origin of the Roman Latin Western alphabet in totality. So when you wonder for a second, why are Greeks and Romans so much alike? A lot of it has to do with the cultural diffusion that was occurring in Italy long before the Romans ever even showed up. So they were kind of bound to adopt a lot of Greek cultural things. Now, the big thing about it, though, is the Etruscans are also going to build the very first walls around Rome, and they are going to rule over Rome and take over the settlement known as Rome from 753 BC to about 509 BC, okay? So the Etruscans are going to conquer and rule over the Romans for almost 200, well, actually over 200 years, for about 250 years. Now, the Romans are eventually going to expel the Etruscans, and there's a big, giant story behind this as well. And, of course, it has a lot of different Roman themes that I don't really want to talk about on the internet, including assault and things like that. It has to do with these two figures, the one Tiberian and Lucretia, and a very, very disgusting thing that happened. But what you need to know is that the Romans, because of the Etruscans, gave them. And a lot of this, of course, has to do with that concept that we talk about constantly, cultural diffusion, right? Cultural diffusion is going to leave behind these major elements of Etruscan society in the Roman era. And here are three of them that are super important, right? One of them being located right there, which is the toga, right? The toga is actually a very gaudy, over-the-top, very ridiculous article of clothing, but the Etruscans wore them, and so the elite and the wealthy of Rome began to wear them as well. Later on, the senators of Rome would wear them with a purple stripe on it, which would actually clarify that they were a part of the government. And anyone who was of the wealthy patrician class would wear a toga to delineate themselves from the poor and the slave, right? Now, also, they're going to adopt the Greek alphabet that the Etruscans got from the trading with the Greeks, and this right here is going to be changed into the modern-day Latin alphabet, which is the root of our alphabet that we still use. And then this device right here, very, very important one that was adopted from the Etruscans, that right there is called a fasces, right? F-A-S-C-E-S. F-A-S-C-E-S, right? A fasces, right? You will hear me say faces all the time because I've been mispronouncing it for years, apparently. But the fasces is a symbol of ruling authority, right? Etruscan leaders would have this thing in their possession to try and show the unity and the strength of the Etruscan government, right? It is wooden rods bound around an axe. This thing is still used in the modern era frequently. You will see this thing, actually, check this out. It's actually located right, okay, let's see if I can find it real quick. The fasces in the Senate, U.S. All right, so inside of the Senate Hall in the back of the room, you can actually see fasces propped up in the very, very back of the entire room. Right here, see? That is where they're located. It becomes a symbol of ruling power that all Western civilizations adopt after Rome. You got to understand, the Greeks have a lot of cultural effects on us as a Western civilization. However, the Romans are going to leave a lasting mark on every single Western civilization. A lot of this is due to the fact that they took over pretty much everywhere that would become a Western civilization, including modern-day countries like Spain, France, Germany, England, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Austria, like all these other areas. And once they have taken them over, cultural diffusion, these symbols will be left behind, right? But what a fasces demonstrates is that ruling authority of the Etruscan government, and it would be eventually used as a symbol of the ruling authority of the Roman government. Now, to keep going forward, you're also going to see the Romans then begin to conquest all of Italy, right? Rome is going to fight several small wars against several different enemies, some of them being the Sabines, some of them being the remnants of the Etruscans, some of them being the Albans, and many other tribes. But the most famous conquest happens against the Aqui, or the Akai, or I gotta look up how to say them, it's going to bother me. What are they called? What are they called? I know what they're called, but I can never say. I can never pronounce this correctly. Uh, the these goofy people that sound with an A. But anyway, they are an Italian or Italic tribe that existed in Italy that began to be a very big thorn in the side of the Romans, right? Now, in this major military campaign, this original seed of power and legend inside of Roman government and culture is going to be established. And it's the myth of Cincinnatus, right? So, what you have to understand is because the Romans were having so much trouble conquering this tribe in Italy, and they were being threatened by this tribe in Italy, and they thought they might lose this war, right? So just so you understand, the Romans are going to then adopt a tradition of appointing someone known as a dictator, right? So this guy right here becomes the very first mythical dictator of Rome. Apparently, Roman officials ran up to this man by the name of Cincinnatus while he was farming outside of Rome. And they said, Cincinnatus, Cincinnatus, if you do not stop what you're doing and come help us right now, we may be defeated at the hands of this outside tribe, and we may lose everything that we have built. So Cincinnatus then apparently wiped the sweat off of his brow and then went off and fought and led the armies against the Achae, is what we're going to call them right now, or the Aquae, is going to lead the armies against them, defeat them. And in the process establishes a tradition in Rome where one man controls the entire government in times of war, because he becomes the very first mythical dictator. And the city in Ohio, known as Cincinnati, is actually named after him, right? So very, very important story to just kind of give you some understanding of the idea of a government being led by one man. Again, a seed of a very important story, just like Romulus and Remus will be a seed of an important story, just like the Etruscans and the symbols that they left behind, right? Because what's he holding? A fasces is going to be seeds of important Roman cultural ideas going forward, right? But this is where we're going to stop, because in our next class period, we're going to talk about the Gallic invasion of Rome and the sacking of Rome by the Gauls, and we're going to talk about how that's going to leave a lasting mark on Rome and how they're going to build up their military following that invasion. But we'll talk about that stuff later on. I will see you guys later. Y'all have a great Labor Day weekend. Be safe. Take the whole mask thing seriously, please. Don't get sick. Come back healthy, and it's going to be really, really great when you get back. By the way, when you get back, we are going to be getting ready for our next map quiz, all right? So I am posting the new map quiz stuff or the new map for the map quiz online right now. And if you go on there, you can start studying and getting ready. It's going to be your old map of the Balkans with a few extra countries added onto it. And we're going to be doing that map the day you come back from Labor Day. All right? So go ahead and bang that thing out. Study it real good. I'll see you guys soon. So for G period, it will be Tuesday. For B and C period, I believe it will be, for B period, I think it'll be Tuesday as well. But whenever you have me next, you're going to have a short map quiz, okay?